Welcome to the pod presented by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. And we have seen the Indiana Hoosiers defeat Florida International. We have seen them defeat Western Illinois. We've seen them win at UCLA. We've seen them defeat Charlotte, Maryland, at Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, at Michigan State. Saw them beat Michigan. That's 10 games, folks. That's 10 wins. That's a lot of wins for the Indiana Hoosiers. We have not seen them lose a game. The only close game, the only one within 14 points was the Michigan one, 2015. They are ranked 5th in the college football playoff standings. Last week, we'll see what happens. They're 5th in most of the polls. They're having the dream season of all dream seasons because I don't even think anyone dared to dream it. It's one of those dreams that's too wild to comprehend. You have to wake up and try to explain it. Not like, hey, I hit the game-winning shot in the World Series, but they moved the World Series to Mars, and then I hit that. I don't know. I don't know what the craziest thing. And
game-winning homer probably in the World Series as opposed to shot.
Shot. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking of
That's what happens in dreams, though. Things are mixed up.
Steph Curry threw me the pass, the pitch, and I hit it. No.
And then Shohei Ohtani, yeah.
Anyway, they go to the Horseshoe on Saturday. And it was like mid-September. We said, hey, they could be 10-0. And people were no way. And here they are. Can they beat Ohio State? This isn't just the first, what I would say, real test for the Hoosiers. This is the test of tests. I know Oregon's number 1, but I don't know that there's a more formidable team to play. There is not a more stacked roster. There is not a team with a higher upside than the Ohio State Buckeyes. And that's who Indiana gets to prove it against. So what they didn't have to, they got a week and a lot of breaks heading into this thing, like Michigan not being good and maybe, I don't know, Nebraska not being as good as maybe you thought. But now they go to the Lions' den, the Buckeyes' den. Ross, I know you spent some time down there last week about the mood of the program. What are they feeling? I know they weren't talking Ohio State ahead of the Michigan game, or maybe they were. Actually, they had a bye week. They're coming off a bye.
They had a bye, yeah. So we did talk about the Buckeyes. Yeah, it was a good trip. Spent the day there. I know earlier this season, Pat had spent some time there too. Kurt Cignetti is a great interview because he just kind of says whatever, and it's great for us reporters. So I sat down with him for about 40 minutes or so, and it's fascinating what's happening there. I think the people within the program that are new to the program, like Kurt Cignetti in 40, 45, maybe, or maybe up to 50 players that were new, brought to the team, 27 transfers, and then some other signees, high school guys. So there's a lot of newness there. A lot of them, especially the guys that came over with Kurt Cignetti from JMU, are like, yeah, we expected it. Like we're not surprised, right? But other people that are around the program that you talk to that have been around the program forever, right, are like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is happening. So it's really interesting. And Kurt, part of the reason that he, the interviews with him are so fascinating and so good is that he is such a confident guy. And we saw that in December, when he said that Purdue sucks and Michigan, Ohio State sucks too, and that he's not going to take a backseat to anybody. And then we saw it in July when he predicted that Indiana would be in the Big Ten championship game back at Big Ten Media Day. So it was interesting to be around him. And I have a story coming out Wednesday kind of on them and on him. But I talked to Nick Saban a little bit about him. And they go back, obviously, way back to West Virginia, to the days when Kurt was a freshman on the West Virginia team, and Nick was the secondary coach working for Kurt's dad, who was the head coach. And, of course, Kurt spent 4 years with him, too, at Alabama, building that program. And I think there's more. One of the overshadowed pieces, I think, of Curt Cignetti is the whole Nick Saban tree a little bit. I think when he talks, the way he talks, the things he says reminds you of a lot of things that Nick used to say when he was coaching and when he was gone. And the way he built the program in the mental aspect, Dan, it's kind of the between the ears sort of thing, the psychological stuff that he focuses on more than maybe other coaches do. And Nick did a lot of that, right? A lot of mental stuff. So, Pat, I don't know what you saw there, but that's kind of like just some different things that I picked up.
Yep, no doubt. He's from the Saban tree. He's just more cocky and outspoken than Saban. He coaches the program the way Saban did. And I heard that from many people at IU. It's like, oh, yeah, we are process, intensity, schedule, routine, attention to detail, those sort of things. The other thing you mentioned that I certainly ran into is the expectation from everybody who came with Cignetti from James Madison. It's like, hey, you know what? We were 10-0 last year too. That's like, yeah, so 10-0 is 10-0. Different league. The ridiculous thing is you're taking the James Madison players, putting them in the Big Ten, and you're still 10-0. But they're winners. They're used to winning. They have a method that they believe spawns and enhances winning. And so that, is it's amazing that you could have something that transferable, because nobody would believe you could take James Madison and go to the Big Ten and be 10-0, but they have with some other pieces, but a lot of the other pieces are, quarterback from Ohio by way of Canada, a guy from Old Dominion, this and that. They got a couple of ACC guys, but for the most part, this is a mass transfer up of talent from a Group of 5 program that before that was an FCS program. Now, Dan, to your point, and I have a hard time even really separating the storylines of Army Notre Dame from Indiana, Ohio State, because it's these two wildest dream scenarios that are running into dream killers. Like two of the biggest overdogs in football. Ohio State and Notre Dame stand in the way of these great, plucky, up and rising stories. I mean, Ohio State, with their 100,000 seat Death Star Stadium and their $20 million payroll and, all the recruiting advantages. Yeah. Okay. Indiana, go take all your FCS guys and walk into Ohio Stadium and beat them. And then for Army, which is just completely counter program 2024 football, go beat the most glamorous program in history and one that is back recruiting at a super high level. And has its own TV network and everything else. So these great, great stories are running into probably some pretty hard truths, but what if they win? Can't wait to actually watch.
That's it. I mean, when we talk about transfers, let me give you this. This is Indiana's transfers. Quarterback, Curtis Rourke from Ohio. Their top 4 leading rushers. Justin Ellison came from Wake Forest, but James Madison, and Elijah Green from North Carolina. Their top 4 of their top 5 receivers, James Madison, Texas Tech, James Madison, Ohio. Their top tight end, Ohio. Their top 5 tacklers, James Madison, Old Dominion, James Madison. The only guy on this list that was an Indiana Hoosier last year is Omar Cooper Jr., receiver. They just got a team. And what I love about this is Cignetti he's brash. You guys tell me, is there a sense of like, I deserve to be here a long time ago?
Yes,
for sure. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. And all in the players too.
Right.
All these they're all playing
no doubt.
With this, like, we took the long road here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is, right, they're playing Ohio State and players and coach who took the shorter road to their positions.
Yeah. This isn't just an underdog team or, hey, slowly a coach got to Indiana, got his shot, like a younger coach, and he built it up by winning some recruiting battles over the other Big Ten teams, and maybe, geez, Curtis, maybe this kid Ohio State should have taken, but they didn't because they went and got this guy. Everybody here was a reject. Nobody wanted any of these guys other than Omar Cooper Jr. He's the only Big Ten recruit. I think maybe one of their tacklers went to BC originally. I mean, I don't know, North Carolina, Wake. But for the most part, no, Ohio State didn't even know any of these guys existed.
Hell no. You look, so many of those guys, too, are from the state of Virginia. And Virginia Tech didn't want them. Look at where those programs have been the last few years. Instead, they went to James Madison, won 11 games last year, and now they're 10-0 at Indiana. It's unbelievable.
Now, in pure talent, this is going to be the interesting thing on Indiana. They don't have the slew of 5 stars at Ohio State, right? And can they match that? Most of these guys are old, right? A lot of experience. They played a lot of games, including they had a hell of a season last year at James Madison. They've played a lot of games. They're 22, they're 23, maybe even more with COVID and all that. Where does that, there's no Jeremiah Smith, right? But Jeremiah Smith's 18 years old, granted, seems like he's 25 and a third-year NFL player, but that's the rub. Can they do that? Will they go in to Ohio Stadium and say exactly what Kirk Cignetti has been saying and what he said last year at that basketball game when he just made the craziest pronouncement ever? Purdue sucks, and so do Michigan and Ohio State do too. Are they going to walk in there and go, Ohio State sucks, we belong here, let's go? Or are they going to walk in and go, all right, this one finally rattles us? Because they haven't been rattled yet. And that is what makes this team, forget the playoff race, this is the ultimate underdog team. This is like a Disney, even Hoosiers, the movie, Jimmy Chitwood, man, he could have played anywhere. He could have played at South Bend Clay in that championship game. He just happened to grow up on that farm and wasn't going to school, or he was going to get academics were going to get him out of that farm. Like, they had Chitwood. Nobody wanted any of these guys. This is this is a Disney movie.
It is. It is.
I wrote Glory Road, the book. That made that a Disney movie. Those guys were all really good players. They weren't recruited because they were African-American. Right. But it wasn't like they couldn't play. It was like, David Lattin, oh boy. Like they matched up with these dudes. Bobby Joe Hill, he's better than our guy. These guys aren't supposed to be anywhere. This is the framing of the transfer debate. Everybody quits. There's it's terrible. There's no loyalty. This is the team that you can frame the whole thing the other way. These guys, nobody wanted, nobody believed in. They sat there as seniors in high school and said, why isn't anybody else recruiting me? And instead of pouting or settling down, they said, hell, I'm going to work so damn hard. We're going to win where we're at. And now here they are. Army is America's team. Okay. We're not going to, those guys are unbelievable. We'll get to them. But this is kind of the American story. And no, I'm not trying to paint Ohio State as some kind of evil empire here or anything like that. It's not like their guys don't work hard. Sorry, you were really talented early too. But this is just an amazing. I don't remember this in a football game. Maybe like Butler basketball or something. But like this, Pat, can you think of a football game this late in the season with this high of stakes where the disparity is this big?
No. I mean,
Boise,
like Boise, Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl, but there was not a national championship still at stake there. And it is still right now for Indiana. And a playoff bid. There are stakes involved here that weren't involved in that Fiesta Bowl with Boise and Oklahoma. But it's unbelievable. It is remarkable. And you get around those guys, and Ross you were there. You can see, all right, okay, that guy's probably an inch or two shorter than you would like. And that guy, oh, really? He's a defensive lineman. He doesn't look that, that heavy. And I mean, so there's things that, some quote unquote really smart recruiters, held against these guys and said, nah, he can't. Yeah, no, we're not going to offer that guy in the ACC or the SEC or the Big Ten. And, Cignetti took them at James Madison. They were really good players. Now they're really good players there. Curtis Rourke actually looks the part. He's a big, strapping, good athlete guy, 6'4", 220 or whatever. But most of these guys, you're like, okay, I can see it. And then they are going to walk into Ohio Stadium, and some of them will probably be like, oh my God, I watched games here. I never believed I would play in one here. And maybe that's an energizing thing, but maybe that's an intimidating thing. But they're going to look at Ohio State guys that all fit the NFL prototype. The linemen are all 6'5" and 320. And the receivers are 6'2", 210. And the running backs have absolute tree trunk thighs and are fast. And the defensive linemen are animals and all that sort of thing. So there's going to be a physical challenge there that they haven't fully seen. They've seen the defensive animals because they played Michigan. Michigan's got 4 NFL guys on defense. But the full roster of them here for Ohio State in that setting is going to be quite the reality check. But I don't know. Ross, Dan, you mentioned these guys are old and experienced, and they've been dying for this shot. And they've had 2 weeks to get ready for it, which I think maybe plays to their advantage. You spend 1 week of like, oh, God, we're going to play Ohio State. And then the next week, like, okay, how are we going to beat Ohio State? And maybe you get your head on and, you reduce this to a football game.
Well, I think, we obviously spend a lot of time talking about talent and stars, right, rankings and stuff like that. But I think, and I get this vibe from Indiana, is you can do more with less if everybody kind of plays together, right? I hate to use the PJ Fleck rows the boat in the same way kind of thing, but it is true, right? When you get in Curt Cignetti said that a few times to me, is when you get like all 11 playing and doing the same thing, which you hear from coaches, and including Nick Saban quite a bit through the years, when you get all 11 doing the same thing, not making mistakes and kind of rowing the same way, it can offset maybe any talent discrepancies you have. So I think, number one, they do play kind of as a team and as a group, and that's a testament probably to the coaching and the experience. And that's the other thing here is, I think the stat is 21 of Cignetti's 27 transfers that he brought in are 3+ years of experience. 13 of them were all conference honorable mention at their previous school. So, and then of course, the same number 13 came from JMU, where they kind of were in his system. And that helped a lot, I think, in the transition, when all these players who are in his system could answer questions and walk through all the new players. And this is how it's done. We're going to show you by example. And then I think the third part is the whole chip on the shoulder. And I get this fantastic quote from Cignetti here to me. I've always functioned best when I got a chip on my shoulder, and I do my best weekly to find one if it doesn't exist already. And the way he delivered it and said it tells you that he always tries to find that kind of motivation. And he doesn't have to look far, right? I mean, they were picked, I think, 16th or 17th in the league. There was a lot made of a team full of G5 players and what they could do in the Big Ten. Aiden Fisher, the linebacker, mentioned that to me. He said something like, too many group of 5 players, they said, right? He said we put that in the back of our mind and we remember it. So there's a few things there, Dan, to make up, I think, for any talent discrepancy. And I think it's everybody playing a team, having that motivation and that chip that their coach and the players all kind of possess, and then the experience of all of them at all these other schools, 3+ years of experience. And I think it's all come together to produce, a historic season and perhaps one of the most improbable kind of turnarounds in college football that we've seen in a while.
Okay. To briefly bring the specter of the playoff, and we want this podcast to not just be simply bracket breaking and all that, right?
Oh, it's exhausting.
Right. Because this is fun.
It's really exhausting.
We like
I know
narratives.
people love it, but God,
I don't know that they love it.
Hypothetical.
I think it gets reaction. I think it gets reaction. And I'd actually would care to know what the fans think. But like I think that there's something great about college football. Look, the playoff and getting in is huge, but there's something magical about college football of the idea that just what we said. A team that completely overlooked, and Curtis Rourke sitting there at Ohio, just down the road, and saying, "God, I'm playing over there, and they don't want me." They could have picked him up as a transfer. They went and got Will Howard. Not saying it's a bad choice. Rourke had an incredible sophomore year 2 years ago. He did less productive last year. But I think there's something great about college football as the story. So, but there is a playoff, and Indiana is 10-0. Obviously, if they win, they're going to get in the playoff, and the dynamic is they're going to play in the probably play in the Big Ten championship game. But if they lose, how important? What is the margin? They do not have a great victory, and even though they would be 11-1, they would be running into a lot of two-loss teams in the SEC that have a great victory. And I think that is, I'm not here to blow smoke on the SEC, but winning, if you're Ole Miss and you're like, hey man, we beat Georgia, and Georgia certainly would have 3 big wins. Like that's not a real comparison. They got a break from the schedule. They drop Louisville. There's different things that happen, but what do they have to show? Is there a way to lose that at 11-1, they can say, hey, look, we still belong in this playoff, and they will win that debate? What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's a lot of playoff implications here. Especially if you lose. You win, it takes care of itself. You lose, and there's that. You want the other chip on the shoulder for 2 weeks. They've been, since these playoff rankings started coming out. Ain't played nobody, Paul. Indiana ain't played nobody. So this is somebody, and it's a big somebody. And if you get trucked, I would just say, well, see, they were just a product of their schedule. And then you slide down, and the pecking order gets really interesting and really complicated with those, presumably 4 SEC teams with 2 losses, and with Penn State. So Indiana, if they lose, they gotta show up. They gotta perform well. It's got to be a good game. They can't get trucked. If they get trucked, I fear for their playoff chances. You got to be able to at least say, all right, we were within 7 to 10 points. Penn State lost by 7 on their home field. We were on the road. I think you have to be in the game. So that's going to be really, really important. If you win, again, it takes care of itself. But I'm telling you, Ross, you've done this too. We've been trying to put together your mock bracket or whatever. And it is so hard, I think, 6 through 11. You got all the SEC 2-loss teams that are good teams that have good wins. You got Penn State, which has a good record but no real good wins, and the home loss to Ohio State. And then you got Indiana, which is undefeated but ain't played nobody. So ordering those and then throwing Notre Dame, that's really difficult. And it's going to be hard for the committee, and we are going to hear so much hollering and screaming about it. And I think a lot of people just flat haven't really watched Indiana. So they just, we'll see. And so again, this is another one where I'm sure the committee has, but I wonder from a public standpoint, this is, if some people are just looking at Indiana for the first time, this would be a very nice time to show up and play well.
I think what they need to do is in the second half it'd still be a relevant game. Maybe at the end of the game they lose by 2 touchdowns, but can they keep it within a touchdown for most of the second half? It feels like what they have to do because, the scheduling is fascinating. because, and I know Scott Dolson, the athletic director at Indiana, maybe talked to Pat about this too earlier, and he talked to me about it as well. They did this study on football at the school, commissioned this study on why they've been so bad at football and how they can improve, right? And one of the things that came up was strategically scheduling. And so they dropped the Louisville game, played $1 million to drop it, and replaced it with FCS Western Illinois, who they beat 77-3. And partly because of that, right, 9 of the 10 games that they played have been against opponents with a 500 or less record. So just one winning record right now, and that's Washington at 6-5. So there's a pretty good chance that, there's a very good chance that they'll end the season having played one ranked team, Ohio State, and there's a decent chance they end the season actually playing one team or 0 teams potentially with a winning record
or beat 0 teams. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's a big one. It's a big one. I think there's a comparative to Penn State that is important there. And that Penn State score, I mean, they couldn't get the goal line. It was close.
I mean, yes, it was a competitive game. Penn State had a chance to tie or take the lead late. But as you pointed out, I mean, Will Howard gave them 14 points and they still couldn't win.
Yeah. So I guess you got to give the defense credit for that pick six and stripping that ball, but that could have gone the other way too. Anyway, absolutely fascinating football game that I don't remember something like that. All right, we'll go right back with some Army talk and more. All right, much like Indiana, Army came along. We saw them beat Lehigh. We saw them win at Florida Atlantic. We saw them beat Rice. We saw them win at Temple and Tulsa. We saw them beat UAB. We saw them beat East Carolina. We saw them beat Air Force. Saw them win at North Texas. And now what we have not seen them do is play a good team or beat a good team. But now they play Notre Dame in Yankee Stadium on Saturday night in November under a slate gray sky. What is that?
Blue-gray sky. And it was October 100 years ago.
It's worse now.
Now it's November.
This is a game out of 1948, 1946. Notre Dame should take the train into New York. Just Marcus Freeman should have one of those old news magazine salesman caps. What do they call those? The news caps or something, right? Yeah. Maybe Joe DiMaggio will go to the game. I don't know. I don't have all the dates wrong. Old school. This is an incredible story. We've been talking about it all year. In an era of transfers and NIL, the school that has no NIL, although they do pay their players, it's members of the United States military. Thank you for your service. No transfers. Here's Army. They will go in. If they win, they beat UTSA the following week and play probably, is it Tulane? I think that's set up. They're going to host
Tulane. Yep.
Probably in Foxborough, I was told. We'll see where that game is going to be played. It's not going to be on campus, I don't think. Or has that even been determined where it's at? Whatever.
It's supposed to be on campus. Nobody's announced anything, but it'd be really hard considering half of Army Stadium is missing.
It's just so funny.
It's already a small stadium.
Unexpected these are. Like you talk about Indiana just scheduling. Well, we need an 8th win. Let's try to get 7 wins. So let's schedule that way. Oops. Army's like, let's just rebuild the stadium this year. Oops. That's how unexpected it is. And, but we saw Notre Dame crush Navy a couple weeks ago. And there was a gazillion turnovers by Navy, but there was also utter domination on the line. I mean, the Notre Dame offensive line is legit. They are, as usual, big. They are NFL prospect rich. They are deep. And that's where you kind of fear for Army. But what do you think, Pat?
Right. The parallels here again are striking, I think. I enumerated a little bit. But the other thing that Army has done, that Indiana has done, is dominate everyone they've played. It's not a fluky 9-0. like BYU pulling stuff out left and right. Miami's pulled stuff. No, Army. I mean, no, they haven't played any, but they've dominated everybody. They've trailed for like 5 minutes once against North Texas early, and that's it. Their style is really problematic and difficult. They've had, like Indiana, 2 weeks to get ready. They've heard for 2 weeks, you aren't ready, you aren't prepared, you don't have the talent, you shouldn't, this game shouldn't even matter, you're going to get trucked like Navy. Navy simply dropped the ball, and Navy's 5 turnovers or 6 were all because they dropped the ball. Navy hypered themselves into a mess. I don't think Army's going to do that. If they hold on to the ball, I think this is a competitive game. You're right, Dan. The physical matchup is problematic, and not just the size, but also Notre Dame has some game-breaking speed. They've got some guys that can go 50 yards, and I don't know. We'll see whether Army can limit the big plays, which they're going to have to do. Army's defense has been great, but one of the main reasons Army's defense has been great is they rarely play because the offense just holds the ball and holds the ball and holds the ball, which also will be difficult against Notre Dame. But you want to talk about a team that I don't think is going to be scared of the challenge here, and that's Army. And, yeah, you touched on it. The history of this is actually incredible. Just give me a minute to go through.
Oh, I'm here for it.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
I didn't do enough research.
This is the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen game, which was Notre Dame against Army, which you alluded to, the Grantland-Rice lead, outlined against the blue-gray October sky, the Four Horsemen rode again. And maybe the most famous lead in sports writing history.
And that was a time, right, that Grantland had, he was syndicated, right? He wrote for a New York paper, but it was syndicated like in 500,000 papers everywhere in America. And everyone read the newspaper. Like what? 100 was there radio then? There's no TV, right?
Yeah, no, there was no TV.
Right,
absolutely not.
That was forget like
that was
game
like,
day's coming. It was like Grantland Rice is coming, and he just wrote this, and it helped establish Notre Dame's the aura of Notre Dame that continues in their ability to be an independent today.
Yes,
like that lead that is so famous that pretty much every person in America read, whether you were on some farm town in Kansas or you were taking the subway the next day, through Brooklyn, is what helped establish Notre Dame. Incredible piece of writing and the impact. And everyone goes, why is Notre Dame independent? It was stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that, honest to God, that was in a way the big bang of the program. I mean, they were good. They had been winning games. Newt Rockne had been there for several years. They had had a couple undefeated seasons, 1919, 1920. So them coming to New York to play Army was a big deal because Army was a power then. You're coming out of World War I. There's still a lot of, great young athletes that want to go to the military academy, be part of the military. So Notre Dame wins that game. Grantland Rice writes that, and that was like the internet where you could get something all over the country. Notre Dame goes to the Rose Bowl, their first bowl game, and their last bowl game for like another 45 years. But Notre Dame goes to the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame can claim a national championship. All of a sudden, Notre Dame is this thing, and it gets bigger and bigger with Newt Rockne. 1928, he has his only bad team, 5-4. They are playing heavily favored Army in Yankee Stadium. They're losing at halftime. Rockne goes in there. What does he do? Win one for the Gipper. Maybe the most famous halftime speech of all time.
Ronald Reagan
into a Hollywood
president.
movie.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan played George Gipp in the movie. It's unbelievable. Fast forward, all right, Rockne dies. Program, it's a little bit of a hard time. One of the Four Horsemen, Elmer Layden, becomes the coach at Notre Dame, restores things. Then Frank Leahy takes it back up to Rockne level. And from 1943 through 47, Army Notre Dame is the biggest thing in college football. One of the other is ranked number 1 every time they play. And they play in New York, and it's this big media thing. And they have these showdown games. And Notre Dame is the national champion in 1943. Army is the national champion in 44 and 45 when they got all the wars going on.
I would
they got
say
all
world
the best
champs
players
too.
in the
World
country.
champs, Army.
Yeah, world champs, absolutely.
Bowl game.
Defeated Hitler, defeated Tojo, defeated Notre Dame and everyone else. Yes. Won back-to-back Heismans, killed Notre Dame. Then 46, the original game of the century, a 0-0 tie. Woo boy, try to spin that one into gold as a writer, but they did. People did. They tried at least. And then 47, Notre Dame wins the national title again, and Army starts to tail off, and Notre Dame keeps going. But for them to play now in Yankee Stadium with something on the line,
incredible,
is just wild.
Incredible. Yeah, this is what, again, this is kind of an elimination game for the playoff or whatever. If all you care about is the playoff, you're missing the whole thing.
Yeah.
If all you're caring about is the playoff rankings with Indiana and Army story and who they're playing, right? Indiana's playing the undeniable number one bully of the Big Ten, and Army's playing the other bully of the whole country. And this is just such an absolutely incredible Saturday not back to back. One's at noon, one's at 7. So this is going to be fantastic. I don't know what's going to happen, but college football everyone likes to talk about their tradition and their history. This is the history, and this is some just great stuff. Okay, it's time for some money moves presented by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. We talk a little sports business here, and how it generally pertains to college football. But what we had last week was National Signing Day, or whatever they're calling it now, with the non-revenue sports, if you will, although that includes basketball and things like that. So I don't even know if that's that. Not football. Football isn't until December. However, we get a model, an idea of how some of these player compensation deals will work in the new revenue sharing system that is coming. And Ross, what did we see from last week's signing day for all the other sports that we can then apply and assume will be the system when the football players start signing or agreeing or whatever they're doing in December at their quote unquote signing day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, administrators I spoke to for the story last week about signing day and the new rev share contracts kind of envisioned the early signing day for basketball and all these other sports, which was last week and continues. It's a signing period to be kind of like the first look and kind of a tryout almost for what you might expect next month on football signing day. And so they did begin some schools. I feel like schools are doing maybe handling this 2 or 3 different ways, Dan, because it is so murky right now. But some schools have distributed a rev share or NIL agreements, right, to athletes, most of them in this case basketball players, that promise a set amount of figures from the school directly in rev share starting next July. So the contract is contingent on the House settlement being finalized in April and then revenue sharing beginning in July. So some are doing that where they've sent out these agreements. And those schools who have done that, also players are signing collective agreements too, right? Because you have to get paid up until July 1, right? Because the rev share doesn't start until July 1. So you'll see next month football players sign potentially these rev share agreements in collective agreements. Collective agreements going to June 30th and in the rev share agreements starting July 1. So that's kind of like the situation, how some are handling it. Others are not sending out the rev share agreements at all. They are letting their collective handle it. And maybe there's an assignment clause or something in the collective contract that it assigns that contract on July 1 to schools, and then schools begin paying it. Or a school just negotiates a deal with the athletes on July 1, right? Or at a later date for July 1. So it's a murky time for sure. And some of the comments from administrators in that story that posted last week, like Ross Bjork at Ohio State, right? We're about to land the plane, but we're still building it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
Great line.
things that are unclear right now. But that's kind of how the contracts and how the signings are kind of working right now.
So we're front loading money while we can, basically, right?
And there's that piece of it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a little bit. Shell game probably isn't the correct phrase, but getting the money in before the money gets either more complicated or problematic. This is the world we're going to live in, right, going forward. And it's funny. That's a great quote from Ross Bjork, because it does seem that this is a little bit like the onset of NIL, where it's like, well, we kind of have rules, but we kind of don't. So we're just going ahead because we have to, but we don't really know what everything's going to happen and what the unintended consequences are going to be. Still fearing for Ross, and you've detailed greatly that, the impact on Olympic sports and other areas where there's just fewer opportunities and there's going to be fewer scholarships and less money. And I think signing day was a fairly sober occasion for some programs in some of those schools and some of those athletes, especially. Like, wow, we don't necessarily have a place to go, or we don't have money to get when we go there.
Yeah, I should mention that other part of this to kind of explain it, Dan, is the whole front loading, right? I mean, starting at some point when the settlement is approved, this NIL clearinghouse will begin. And it's supposed to be the post-settlement enforcement model where all non-school NIL deals, specifically from boosters, will have to make it through this clearinghouse and be approved by the clearinghouse in order to be executed, right? And there's some questions around when that begins. Does it begin in April after the settlement is finalized? So do all deals that are struck after April, after the settlement's finalized, go through? Do it just deals that pay out after July 1 go through the clearinghouse? So there's still some questions there. But as Pat said, schools and collectives are trying to front load, is the term they've used to describe this, where they are collective contracts. If a collective contract, let's just say, pays a kid $100,000 over the year, 90,000 of it or so, right, will be paid before July 1, before the clearinghouse potentially takes effect, so that deal doesn't have to go through the clearinghouse and is already paid out. So we're seeing that happen at plenty of places, especially the power leagues that are trying to save cap room. And that's what this does, right? People are probably asking, why would you do that? Because it saves you cap room, and you don't have to also go to the clearinghouse, as we talked about, but it also saves you cap room. So that player is only on the cap for the next fall for maybe the 10,000 of it, 100,000 if you paid out 90 before July 1. So a lot of that is happening as well.
Yeah, and you got to be smart with it. So two things here. One, this feels like the senior class right now is like the NFL draft class that had Sam Bradford, as I think he was the last rookie who got number 1 pick overall, who got to negotiate his like an open-ended contract. And he signed like an $86 million deal or something like that, or $50 million guaranteed. And the NFL was changing that because they were spending so much money on these QBs that turned out to be Sam Bradford and not on proven, and so the Players Association was like, enough with this. And now you have a rookie salary scale, which changed the way the NFL teams are constructed. Right. The best thing you can have is a great quarterback on a rookie salary scale, because you can spend that money on all these other players. So this is like this little window. You better be smart on it. Here, does this apply? Because we got a lot of headlines the last couple of weeks about Bryce Underwood, who's the number 1 recruit in America. Tremendous quarterback from Belleville, Michigan. He has been committed to LSU for almost a year, and he is going to receive NIL money there. I had heard as much as $5 million originally, but then we heard these reported offers from Michigan, $10.5 million over 3 or 4 years to go play for the Wolverines, which sent a lot of people into a tizzy. I didn't really think was that. I don't think $2.5 million or whatever for QB. Take a look at Michigan this year without one.
Right.
Take a look at LSU.
His bargaining power has improved. That's for sure.
It's someone you're just going to have to get your mind around the idea that if you're going to spend $10 million on Brian Kelly, you better get him a quarterback.
Right.
But people got all up in arms. I heard this is ridiculous. This is terrible. Oh my God, whatever. It's like, hey, these two teams aren't very good without him. So here's this kid. He may be the last guy with the true, but that would not it appears he's going to go to LSU until he shows up on campus and there's a pile of $10 million. Also Sharon Moore, dude, in-state kid, and you got 10 mil. Got to get that. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's a recruiting loss. You can't blame it on the other guy paid more. That's the, no one's ever lost an in-state 5-star legitimately.
That's right.
Come on, Michigan. Like $10 million to go to Michigan and be the starting quarterback. No. But obviously he's going to make a ton at LSU. And I think it's a sign that it's not about the top dollar. Like, he's going to make a ton of money. Be comfortable. Go where you believe.
Yeah.
If you believe Brian Kelly and LSU is the place, then go to LSU. It's a great place to play football and go to school, and maybe Brian Kelly's your coach long-term or not, but you can always transfer. But anyway, right now, that deal would not need to go through a clearinghouse, but in a year, it would need to go through a clearinghouse because there's no legit NIL that's worth $10.5 million.
Well, no, there's not, but remember, they can mix and match. So maybe, say it's $10 million over 4 years. Well, maybe of the 10, the school's paying 7, and real NIL brand deals will get them 3 extra over 4 years. Maybe there's something like that, right? You can do that. I would expect to see schools begin to do that. The timing of when the clearinghouse takes effect still is kind of hazy. We wrote in that story, the belief right now from administrators, and a lot of this stuff is still being ironed out, but the belief right now is that deals that are struck and executed before April, before the settlement is finalized, if they pay out after July, any deals that pay out after July 1, right, is subject to the cap. That's the belief right now from administrators. So that's why you're having the front loading. So Dan, I mean, in this case, they could somewhat front load his money, I guess, right, of a portion of it. That way it doesn't count on the cap and it won't go through the clearinghouse. But eventually, right, they're gonna the NIL portion of his deal, the outside NIL portion of his deal, no matter what, will probably have to at some point go through the clearinghouse, right? Because they're not going to pay all of that, before July 1. So at some point it will have to go through the clearinghouse, I would think. Now, school deals, Dan, like if 7 of the 10 million is coming from the school directly, my understanding is school deals don't have to go through the clearinghouse. It's just the outside NIL. So say, again, we're just making up numbers here, but say 3 million of the 10 is outside NIL. That's going to at some point have to go through a clearinghouse unless they front load all the $3 million to them before July 1 through NIL, which I would doubt that much.
Get your checkbooks out, and folks. Need a QB.
Well, also you got to think about the cap too. I think that's really the front loading. More important to the front loading is not the clearinghouse, but it's saving on your first year of the cap. As Michael Alford, the Florida State athletic director, said very bluntly, and honestly, I'll give him that, said this is the 1 year you can manipulate the cap, right? Yep. Because you can front load deals and save money on your first year of
capologist.
So,
we need a capologist.
Yeah, a lot of schools are hiring capologists. Absolutely. For that story, I talked to many schools that are hiring capologists.
Jennifer Garner from Draft Day. She's the capologist. All right. That was Money Moves presented by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. We'll be back right after this with some coach firings and, I got a people's court. Speaking of money moves, a whole bunch of dudes are getting fired this week. I'm not even sure I got them all here. There was a flurry for mid-November. Temple, UMass, FAU. Okay, cool. Owls. Southern Miss previously. Who else got fired? Phil Longo got fired at Wisconsin.
They had some coordinator fire. Yeah, East Carolina.
East Carolina
coach,
fired.
Did you say Rice, FAU, Ball State, Kennesaw State, Charlotte?
Oh, yeah, Kennesaw. Oh, yeah, Charlotte.
There's 10. I think there's 10 group of 5 firings. 3 of them happened yesterday.
I think it's like UMass now has an interim coach. It's like, congrats, you're the interim coach. Bad news. You're playing Georgia this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Couldn't we have held on another week?
Mhm.
None of these teams are going to turn the season around. We can talk about who they hire at a later date, but is everyone getting fired in mid-November because the portal's coming and you need to try to find somebody to come in and keep what you have and find new guys? Is the portal now impacting what they used to call like Black Monday? They still do in the NFL, where everyone's getting the pink slip. They should call it that. Pat?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I think it has in the past. Like, the remarkable thing is it's not the driving force at the power conference level. We still have had 0 power conference firings, which is just wild sitting here on November 19th. But at the level below, where you're concerned about getting raided or you want to raid your competitors, then yes, you better get on your roster management now. The thing that fascinates me here, 5 coaches have been fired in the American Athletic Conference. And somehow Trent Dilfer isn't one of them. But anyway, that league has just absolutely had a carnage. I suspect Jeff Monken and Army broke the league. This is their first year. They come sailing in. They're 7-0. They're going to the conference championship game, and they're in the mix for the playoff.
And
everybody else is like, good God, if Army can do this, why aren't we? And Tom Herman got whacked in his second year, and that's probably too soon at FAU, but he's saying, we just moved up into the league last year. Well, Army moved up this year. And Army has all of your excuses for why you can't leave when Army wins, right? They got no NIL. They got no recruiting as far as we're getting talent. They got no backyard to recruit to, and here they are. So I think that with the possibility of an AAC champion getting into the playoff, the rest of these schools are looking there and saying, we got to get it together. Especially, look, there's a talent vacuum or a power vacuum at the top of that league since the schools left. Since Cincinnati left UCF, Houston, the opportunity is there. You still got Tulane, you got Memphis, but now you got the service academies up there too, and I think everybody else is like, all right, enough screwing around. We're going to try to get in the game here.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think another point is it's harder to win at these group of 5 schools, and I think it's going to continue to probably get worse. And so you're just going to have schools with more and more losses piled up, and usually that leads to more and more firings. So I think there's a domino effect too, right? When somebody else does it, it's like, oh, I guess we should do it. They did it, and I think that's part of why you're seeing all of this happen in a little short span. But Dan is right too. The transfer, right? Everybody wants to have their coach in place by Thanksgiving. Just on the phone with somebody last week about that, and because of the portal and getting ready for the portal, the Power 4 conference coaching landscape is fascinating. For the first time in a long, long, long time, there may not be a firing. It's pretty wild. There's maybe 2, maybe 3 schools that folks are watching, but there truly may not be a firing at the Power 4 conference level. And I think part of that, Dan, is what we just talked about in Money Moves, which is the revenue sharing coming to college athletics, and these schools having to try to find $20+ million to distribute to athletes starting next year.
How about all these grumpy coaches that hated NIL? Now they're getting their jobs saved because
the jobs are saving.
Can't afford it. I'm 1-11, but whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Very important news. The Pop Tarts Bowl is coming up. I used to call it the Pop Tart Bowl, but it should be the Pop Tarts because there is more than one. We have 3 mascots last year. If you remember, there was a edible mascot, right? We had the mascot. Oh, yeah. He was a Pop Tart, a strawberry Pop Tart. He ran around, and then they lowered him into a toaster at the end of the game, and out popped a cooked Pop Tart that all the players, a massive Pop Tart that all the players could eat. I can't remember who won the thing. Who won that game? Was it Whoever.
Doesn't matter. We just
Somebody
know that
ate the Pop Tarts. It was great.
TV.
We loved it. Who didn't love the Pop Tarts Bowl? And they were trying to really market this as like the Pop Tart wanted to be eaten, because there's a little bit of a barbaric nature to this, obviously. So he held a sign that said, "Dreams do come true." That if you have the mentality of a Pop Tart, you do not want to not be eaten. You want to be eaten. Okay, I don't know. I can't argue otherwise.
Oh my God, Joe, clip that line right there. If you have the mentality of a Pop Tart,
you
want it to be eaten.
I have the intelligence of a Pop Tart. Anyway, he waved the thing as he got lowered in the toaster, because that was obviously like horrified kids. Like, Mom, they're eating what? Like, you wouldn't want the Philly fanatic dying, would you? Or you wouldn't want like Bucknut or whatever the guy is. I don't know what these things are. All right. Anyway, this year, the Pop-Tart people ever forward.
Yes.
Always expanding. They're always looking for new flavors. They're going to throw frosting on something you didn't expect. They're always hitting you with something, right? So you're like, yeah, Pop-Tarts. Been around a while. They're now going to have three mascots. We're going to have Frosted Hot Fudge Sundae, Frosted Wild Berry, and a mystery flavor. Okay. There are 3 mascots at the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and then the game MVP will get to choose which one he wants toasted, put down in the toaster. And the other 2, I don't know what happens to them. They have to sadly watch because they didn't get chosen.
They get eaten at room temperature.
Yeah. Oh, Kansas State won.
Okay.
Kansas State beat NC State. Anyway, so there you go. Are you in favor of this?
I welcome the Pop-Tarts arrival in college football, and I love the edible mascot. I don't care if it may look barbaric. I mean, we used to, when we were kids, you got to watch the lions like eating the gazelles on the Serengeti plain on those like Mutual of Omaha. They didn't sanitize that, so this is okay.
Kids will be fine.
Yeah, the kids will endure. They'll be okay. So yeah, more Pop-Tarts the better. Who doesn't want more Pop-Tarts? I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different flavors of Pop-Tarts, and people are very picky. I was always wondered, there was only offering these players and coaches one kind of flavor, so now we get our pick. I didn't see the protein Pop-Tart on there, Dan. I ate the protein Pop-Tarts. They are good.
Well, there is a protein Pop-Tart?
There is a protein Pop-Tart, I think, made by, I think it's like Legends or Legendary. They're good.
Well, then that's not an official Pop-Tart, is it?
Yeah.
No, it's not. They're probably, they stole that. Yeah.
It's a different it's a different type of frosted pastry that gets toasted.
But it looks like a Pop-Tart.
One of these people should be sponsoring this podcast, by the way. I mean, don't let Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA, get all the hype around here, Pop-Tart people.
That's right. We can take multiple sponsors.
All right. People's Court. It's a good one. Let's just say this has been dubbed Operation Bear Claw. Operation Bear Claw, and not the pastry Bear Claw. This was an insurance investigation in California. So it is not completely uncommon if you live in certain areas of the country to have a wild bear come up to your car. And they can scratch your car. They can damage your car. Your car can be parked out in the driveway, or you could be camping or whatever. And the bear comes. And sometimes these bears even get inside the car. They get the door open. I've seen videos of the bears inside houses, but they get inside the car and it's a damn bear. It will tear it apart, ruin it, wreck it, forget it. So that occasionally happens. And obviously you have car insurance, and the bear damage covers the car insurance covers it sucks, right? Your car gets wrecked by some bear.
Yeah.
Well, few guys in California came up with a plot, and there was a run of claims on luxury vehicles getting ripped apart by a bear. And they investigated, and so the group is accused of providing video footage from the San Bernardino Mountains in January of a bear. So they would have it on camera and then send it to the insurance company as proof of the damage of a bear moving inside a Rolls Royce and 2 Mercedes. Now, again, if you got a Rolls Royce, maybe park that in the garage.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe don't go camping with your Rolls Royce. But what do I know? I don't own one. So they sent video of a bear moving inside a Rolls Royce and 2 Mercedes as part of their damage claims. Photos provided by the insurance department shows appears to be scratches on the seats and doors. And that would cause you to get the money for the $142,000 in one claim, stuff like that. However, the insurance company viewing the video of the Rolls Royce suspected it was not a bear that was inside, but someone in a bear costume.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Not a real bear, a bear costume. Detectives expanded Operation Bear Claw across the insurance industry, found two additional claims with 2 different insurance companies for the same date and loss, the same car. So these guys were getting insured by multiple cars or multiple insurance, and they claimed it so they're getting paid by everybody, and it was the same date of loss at the same location. Right? Don't you save when you bundle? Isn't that it? I don't know. They're trying to put one over on Flo. Right. They're trying to put one over on Jake from State Farm. No. Similar video was provided of the bear inside the Mercedes. So this obviously major red flags. The department brought a biologist in from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to review the 3 videos, who concluded, quote, it was clearly a human in a bear suit. Scratching up the deal to get the money. And then after executing a search warrant, the authorities at this place, at the suspect's home, found the bear costume.
Oh no, the murder weapon.
They didn't.
Gotta hide the murder weapon.
I mean, even OJ got rid of them gloves, man.
Yeah,
you gotta get rid of the. Oh my God.
4 LA residents were arrested as part of Operation Bear Claw. Justice Forde put him in the clink forever, or real men of genius who just should have hid the bear costume.
I mean, I'm really torn because the creativity that goes into this, but also the stupidity to think that you can produce video and tell people, yeah, that's a bear and it's not a bear. I mean, come on. Like, everybody saw Star Wars and knows Chewbacca was a guy in a costume, right?
Spoiler.
And all the bogus Bigfoot videos, it's pretty clear that's a guy in a costume. It's going to also be the case in this. I mean, if you're trying to pretend to be a bear, you're probably not going to be that convincing. So you know what? I think I would have to hammer them with the sentence for being just dumbasses, and especially not getting rid of the costume. I mean, that's got to go in the nearest, like, 7-Eleven dumpster as soon as you're done pulling off this scam. You keep it. Why do you keep it? Like, so you can tell people sitting around Christmas, hey, yeah, I wore this thing when I pulled off the insurance scam.
I put the bear pic. There's a pic. I put it in the rundown. If you guys go look right under the.
Oh, okay.
There is a pic. We have not gotten the video yet. I can't wait. I don't know what this guy was thinking. I don't know what that guy was thinking. Ross had to run, so we will not get his judgment, but I'm sure. I mean, look at this picture of the bear costume. I mean, it's absurd. It's a pretty good looking bear costume. They didn't squelch. They didn't cheap out on that, but I can't wait to see the video.
It's got like the barbecue pulled pork shredder claws.
Yeah, those claws. Right. Yeah. They really do. It's just
it's not the worst bear costume I've seen.
How much weed did these guys smoke when they were coming up with this idea? And then where did they find the Rolls Royce and the like?
Yeah.
Hey,
That's
man,
what you
if
really just want to be in on the planning session for this and the brainstorm.
I need more details. Also, like, again, like, do you just go camping and then they break in your car, you get the money? Like, who goes camping with a Rolls Royce?
Or a Mercedes, either one. And then, they get greedy and they're filing with multiple insurance places. No,
I would love I would love to hear the planning session, and then when the detectives were like, "Wait, what are we investigating? Oh, this is gonna be great." Everybody
then
at the
show up in the house.
Yeah, everybody wants in on that. Everybody wants in on that. Well, Operation Bear Claw, ongoing saga. Well, we'll cover more of this. Don't try to get one over on Flo.
The insurance companies like their money.
Yeah, they're going to check this out. They're bringing the biologist. I kind of feel, and then, they're all going to be in the clink. And, come on, Jimmy, you should have acted more like a bear. You do. How do you act like a bear? That's terrible. All right. That's our show. We'll be back on Thursday. We will pick all these games. Exciting week in college football. Penultimate week of the regular season. Anytime I can say the word penultimate, I like my chances of I'm gonna do it. Let's just put it that way. I'm gonna do it. So thanks for watching and listening. Thanks again to Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA.